Hello guys, and welcome back to our 8th episode of Season 2's Fan Factory Friday Spotlight. Today we're checking out Iron Angel's factory, and upon entering the factory I knew I'd bitten off more than I could chew, so to speak. But if you enjoy my attempt at both executing my graphics card and covering this factory, then please be sure to hit the thumbs up, and if you want to see more Satisfactory inspiration and haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. Anyway, let's jump in. So firstly, I should mention this is a modded save, and I will endeavour to include all the mods used in the description below, but most notably he uses MoarFactory and the PUREX Reprocessing mod to add some great looking architecture as well as extending the playability of the game. And with 370 hours in the game, he certainly hasn't wasted a single moment. The hub area is pretty self-explanatory, with the player structures and a storage area close by, whilst beneath is a large train station, or several, which collects the excess ore and ingots so that they can be stored until further need. Before we go further in, I do feel that the best way forward and to explain this build is to check out the handy map that Iron Angel sent me. He's divided the map into various areas, so we have the nuclear power plant here with the yellow box surrounding it, the aluminium plant or aluminum in the center, as well as the ore refinery in this section here, and we also have an area dedicated to steel, turbo fuel, and in this section up here, a temporary plant for the required space elevator parts. So let's travel all the way along this train line to the ore refinery section. Firstly, ore is brought in by conveyor bus directly from the miners, which looks great, and this whole factory reflects his self-imposed rules of no impossible clipping and no permanent floating factories. If you follow the line to the factory, everything neatly converges underneath the factory, and I love these bulky supports. The ore is then brought above the factory, where he uses the pure ingot alternate recipes to produce en masse, which is hugely necessary for the late game mega factories. Once refined, they are taken to the train station to be moved along, and I'd like to point out here that often with massive factories you find players often building the easiest and fastest scalable solution to these massive factories. And although this factory is very regimental and uniformed, I can truly appreciate the logistics and purposeful architecture. Using overhead feeding, he keeps the factory floor open and clean, and thanks to importing the water from the top of the mountain, he rarely has needs for pumps due to the use of gravity. And I love the grouping of pipelines. If we check out the water extractors at the top of the mountain, you can see how he's supported the pipeline as it descends to the factory, something I can really appreciate. And then he has the bottom extractors, which feed an old power generator. At this point, he could quite easily make this setup pumpless, using the system we talked about in one of our recent videos, which I'll place in the top right hand corner now if you guys want to check it out. But again, I can't really fault this setup. Following the train lines back to the factory, I must admit how much I admire the train line setup. It looks great, and I love the rails being supported from the mountains. It's a really nice way of justifying the placement of the rails in a valley. All these factories are easily accessible by train or hypertube, which is useful, and what I like more is these aren't just temporary hypertubes like a plaster or band-aid put over a wound. He's supported them with foundations affirming their importance both leading to and within the factory setting. And moving on to the steel factory, the factory itself is open and clean, producing beams, pipes and encased industrial beams with plenty of room for expansion. And it also has a small backup coal power plant if ever he should need it. Next, we will cover the temporary factory. Originally used for the space elevator parts, now all items are fed directly to the item crusher to produce coupons, which I would recommend everyone does when they're at this late stage of the game. Also notice that despite this being a temporary factory, at no point does it look messy. Everything is neat and clearly organized. We then have neighbouring this the turbo fuel factory and semi-permanent fuel plant with 78 fuel generators. Although with his nuclear facility there really is no need for this, although I guess in a meltdown this could be very useful as a backup. The penultimate event leads us to a bauxite site where aluminium or aluminum scrap is produced and then shipped by train to a foundry array, which is then moved on to become alclad aluminium sheets. Now, creating aluminium is definitely with many difficulties, but one problem he willfully took on was the construction of the bauxite factory in the Red Forest, where some foliage is at an indestructible state, let's say. And I have to admire how he actually built his factory around the nature with no clipping, and more importantly, it still looks great. So for that, sir, I'll take my hat off to you. Lastly, we have the uranium production and nuclear got you, power plant. The uranium is taken by train from the cave beneath the waterfall, and I must admit the rail support is rather picturesque here, and the MoarFactory mod adds a little bit of character to it too. He's also been pretty creative with the suspension bridge here. You may have saw one previously as well, which is nice as it leads on to the nuclear production facility located above the grassy plain waterfalls. The factory itself is pretty massive, and you'll notice straight away the piping stands out, and I would love to know why he chose to do this weave effect linking all the pipes together. But I must say it looks gorgeous and leads on to a total of 42 nuclear power plants boasting a potential capacity of 102,500 megawatts, which is pretty crazy. The production facility for the fuel rods follows the same rules as previous, and here he's taken the liberty to playing around a bit more with the Moar mod. And though I love the nuclear fuel units and the silo container, I can also understand the spinning radar placement, but I'm not a huge fan of this sphere and would personally prefer some chimney stacks, but that really is just a personal preference. The last thing I will mention though is the waste is being stored on site, and ideally you're going to want to ship that away from here, as eventually this place will become unenterable, if that's even a word. But with that exception, when all is said and done, this is a really well thought out map, making great use of both trains and conveyor lines, as well as the hypertubes linking everything together, and I really cannot say a bad word about it when it comes to how he's developed this factory. Some really amazing craft work here, and I can't wait to see more from him. But with all that said and done, we are going to leave it here, as I'm pretty sure this is a little longer than the ideal 7 minutes. So if you did enjoy this Fan Factory Friday, be sure to hit the thumbs up, and if you want to see more, don't forget to subscribe. Anyway guys, until next time, thank you so much for watching, and as always, Ciao for now.